Hi everyone, welcome to the Worsted Fibre podcast. Welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, hi, my name's Troy. I am the fiber artist behind Fox and Oak Designs. I'm also a musician and now an accounting student. So welcome. If you like what you see here, please comment down below and maybe give a like to the show. And if you really like what I do here, subscribe to the channel. If you're an old friend, welcome back. If you're a friend who's been following the podcast for quite some time, you might recognize that I said welcome to the Worsted Fibre podcast. I think I'm just going to continue using that name to differentiate these videos that I'm doing for the channel, which is really just me talking about the stuff that I'm doing. I think me dropping it as a whole was kind of an overcorrection from when I left Belfast Mini Mills. I'm not going to get further details about that, but because of the fact that I came up with the Worsted Fibre podcast name, I'm just going to continue using it. So yeah, so welcome back to the Worsted Fibre podcast. The name of the channel is not going to change. It's going to be Fox and Oak Designs because I'm planning on doing a couple other things here with the channel. I'll get more onto that later. But welcome back. So without any further ado, let's get into today's episode. So it's a bit of a whip parade because I'm just going to talk quickly about a few of the whips that I'm working on. And then I'm going to show you my finished objects, quickly talk about two of them, and fully talk about a third one, and then give you a little life update if you're interested here at the end. So the first thing I got on my list is a pair of mittens that I'm making for my good friend, Sam. So Sam's birthday's coming up, and they wanted a pair of green mittens, so I'm making them a pair of green mittens. So this is the Maize pattern by Tin Can Knits. It is a great beginner knit. It is a great beginner mitten pattern, and I'm just making a few modifications to it to make it a little bit more unique, so that way Sam has a one-of-a-kind item. But I really like the detail that's here on the side. I don't know how well you can see that with this particular yarn, but it utilizes knits and purls, so like ribbing on the side to just add a little bit of interest. You'll notice that the main part of the mitten is done in a reverse stockinette. And otherwise, it's pretty standard for a mitten. This is a free pattern. It's available on their website, and I believe it's also available in their app that they just came out with. And yeah, it's a great workhorse, really quickly knit mitten. I am using Lion Brand Heartland in the color Green Heather, I think, to make this pair of mittens. I've almost completed them, so I've got, I think I've got 2 more rows on the top here, and then I have to do a thumb, and then they are completed. This is one of those interesting mittens that while it is written like to be mirrored, so that way you're just making 2 of the same mitten in order for you to make a pair of mittens as opposed to 2 mirror images. It looks as though they are, oop, I just dropped my ball. They look as though they are mirrored mittens as opposed to identical mittens, right? So here you can see that there's the like ribbing that kind of feeds into, if you're wondering like where my middle finger is here, that's in between my ring finger and my middle finger. The ribbing reaches as far as there almost, whereas on the palm, like it's really just going up. This is the front of my pinky. So it looks like it's a mirrored mitten, but you can take it off, and just because of how things are aligned, it's the same. So here's the back of my left hand. Right here is the middle of my fingers. That's between my middle finger and my ring finger. And then on this front, this is the front of my pinky finger. I find that really, really interesting. The only change I've made is that here, along the forefinger, I've included a little row of stockinette stitches here, just so that way it's a little bit more unique for Sam. And it kind of just continues like a little design feature that's here in the ribbing where the thumb comes out of. It's a thumb gusset construction, really, really easy to follow. And as long as you follow it exactly, you will not have any issues making this mitten. So I'm planning on finishing this here for the 29th of January, which I just need to sit down for an hour to finish it. So I'll probably be finishing it this week. But yeah, that is Maize by Tin Can Knits. So the next thing I want to quickly chat about is my music hoodie. So this hasn't changed from the last time, but I was able to go find this at Michael's. So this is a floral hoop, and this is a 14-inch floral hoop. So my plan for this is that I'm going to continue knitting around in white, and then I'm going to make it big enough that like the white part can be pulled over and then tacked behind it. I don't know exactly how that's going to work just yet. I feel like I should probably block this along the ring and just like sew around it and see how I get along. So that way I don't have to do more work than is absolutely necessary. So that will be the plan. So I'll have a 14-inch ring around this little cool piece of knitting, and I am going to put it on the wall behind me somewhere, although you can't really see much on the wall behind me that's left, because I'm covering the only part, and like that bulletin board, it's stuck here until I leave the apartment. But yeah, I just wanted to quickly show you that I was able to find a ring for this, and hopefully next time that I have another episode of the podcast, I will have this finished and I'll show you what it looks like. All right, so the next whip that I have to talk about is a whip that is on my Maker's Dozen. So I have just been trucking away on my little Turkish Spin here. So this is my Turkish Spindle, and I'm working on 100% Merino. That was part of a tester package that I used to do for Belfast Mini Mills. We tried some dyeing effects. And this was me trying to utilize how the dyes split in different ways. So I dyed this as a braid and not as just a strip of roving. And I used a color that liked to split into different shades. So this is just one shade of dye, and part of the dye is deep burgundy, like right here. And although it's showing up more red on the screen, there's like an iridescent blue that comes up in some of these spots. It's a blue-purple, blue-violet, and it splits in interesting ways, and it is spinning up into a purple burgundy sort of single that has like an iridescence to it. I really am enjoying it, and I'm just trucking along. So what I'm doing is just every time I have 10 or 15 minutes in between like the time frames that I'm moving between classes, just so that way I have like I'm managing my time in a way that doesn't make me burn out. I just spin a little bit if I feel it, or if part of my classes includes a video that I get to watch for 4 or 5 minutes, then I will spin while watching the video. But I'll talk more about the school stuff later. So that is how I'm trucking along here. I'd say that I'm probably about halfway through this, maybe about 55% through, maybe closer to 60. And once I finish this little section, I will take my little turtle shell off of my Turkish spindle and start the second half of this roving and just make a quick 2-ply. So getting a little ahead on this just so that way I have some variation in what projects I'm working on. So this is my Turkish Spin, and that is on my Maker's Dozen, which if you have followed the Ravelry, if you've gone down to Ravelry and looked at my queue, you'll notice that these aren't on here. And that's because I don't know how to add a spinning project onto my Ravelry queue. I don't know if you can. I've done a little bit of Googling search. I think I can add a project to my queue, and I can make this into a project. I know that, but still working on it. Still working on it. So the last thing that I'm going to quickly talk about when it comes to whips is the collab that I'm doing with Red Island Fibres. So this is also the first thing on my Maker's Dozen. So it's the first thing I'm planning on completing. Yeah. So just to reiterate what I'm working on here, this is Red Island Fibres, 100% eco-processed, DK weight merino. I don't know if I said all those words in the right sequence, but that's what this is. It's 100% merino, eco-processed. It's available in a DK weight. And the colorways are Gray Days and Looks Like Fall. And I am working using these two colors to make, right now, a pair of mittens. I think I have some thoughts about how this is working up. So this is, I'll just hide my thumb, my thumb yarn so it doesn't look any different. So this is the beginnings of the mitten. So that's the palm, and then this is the back of the mitten. And what I'm doing right now is I'm combining the techniques of brioche, which is what this section is, and I'm combining double knitting, which is what the rest of the mitten is. And the reason why I'm doing that is, one, I want to do something brioche. And this sounds like fun. And two, the reason why I'm using double knitting is the way that brioche stitches kind of knit up. They are very loose. They are very open. And there's a lot of drape to it. And since I am using 3.75 needles with this DK weight, that actually ends up being a slightly looser gauge than what is typically used for a DK weight. However, when this gets blocked, I want there to be lots of open spaces between the light color and the, well, in this case, looks like fall color. So I've been doing double knitting, so it's like knitting two mittens in one, so that way, even though the mitten fabric is looser than it would be otherwise, that's a double fabric, so it adds a lot of squishiness to the fabric, and it also adds a lot of warmth. The only qualms, my concerns, not my qualms, my concerns with how this is turning out is that I feel like, A, I might be making it needlessly complicated for no reason, which... The music hoodie is a great example of me making things way too complicated. So there's a part of me that feels like combining brioche and double knitting is a little much, but I kind of think the result that you're getting from this is really quite nice, because the brioche rib that I've got down here at the bottom, because this is just plain brioche working in the round, it doesn't make a super tight cuff. And I don't like super tight cuffs. So if you're with me on that, it makes a nice cuff that has quite a bit of stretch to it still. And because the fabric is a little bit looser fitting, it is more willing to stretch around your hand. Yeah, so since I'm also doing double knitting and I'm using a bigger needle, the fabric of each of the layers is quite a bit looser than it would be otherwise, looser than what you'd want in a mitten, but that's causing the fabric to drape around your hand and have a little bit of additional elasticity around your hand, so it kind of makes it a little bit more form-fitting, while not feeling like that extra pressure of like the fabric stretching around it, because the fabric readily stretches, but it's stretching nicely around your hand. And this is a happy accident. This was not part of the plan, but it actually makes a reversible mitten. So the mitten, oh, I should put this on the right hand, or the left hand, in fact. My needles are distorting it a little bit, but it's making a reversible mitten. So that way the secondary color, in this case, is showing up here on the side. And then we've got the darker color. So I will take pictures and put them up here so that way you can see a little bit better of what I'm referring to. But yeah, that's just an accident. And yeah, I'm really enjoying it. If you're familiar with double knitting, you might know that when you're working with double knitting, if you're not swapping your colors back and forth, there's nothing stitching the two fabrics together, and you are right. However, I have added a design feature on both sides of the mitten. So it's kind of hidden here, but there is swapping of colors right here, so that way it stitches the side of the mitten together. And then I have the same thing on, and just so that way you can see it, I've got the same idea here along the, it's going up the side of the thumb, so that way the sides of your stitches, the side of the mittens are stitched together. And my plan is to continue both of those lines going up both sides of the mitten to stitch everything together, and then I'll figure something out for the top. I haven't figured out the top yet. I'll get there when I get there. The changes that I'm probably going to make from this first prototype to the actual iteration. So what I'm planning to do with this mitten is, this is my prototype. This is just me trying stuff out. And then the second mitten will be like me following like a pattern and making additional changes. And that will likely be the like actual mitten for to be put out as the pattern. If I can get some test knitters, comment down below if you're interested in being a test knitter, or go to the Ravelry page, and I will put up a blog about becoming a pattern tester for me, and I'll be in contact with you otherwise. But it'll also be the pattern that the pattern testers get. I think I'm going to put a little, have this little design feature. I'm going to have this go up on the other side of the thumb as well, so that way it comes up and around the thumb on both sides, just as a little design feature, and then have it rejoin as a single strand going up the side of your fingers. I don't know how I'm going to be joining the fabric at the very tip of your fingers, if that's even possible, but again, we'll get there. Yeah, so this mitten pattern doesn't have a name yet. It probably won't have a name until a little bit later when I'm further along in the pattern. My original thought of doing this is to make a mitten and hat set, because these are DK weight balls. There's quite a bit of yardage in each of these. I think it's 275 yards in each of these balls. I should be holding things on this side. So I think the yardage of these is 275 yards per ball. I'll put it on the screen. So there's quite a bit of yardage in each of these, and I wanted to make a project. Ideally, I want to make a mitten and hat set, if I can get away with using the entirety of the skeins. And I'm going to be doing the largest sizes to see how far I can get. So this mitten is the largest size that I'm going to be including. Yeah, so that's how I'm getting along with this. I don't know if I'm going to finish, like, actually making the pattern, like, perfectly finished and available by the end of February. I'm going to do my best. But that's how that's trucking along. So that is a reversible brioche mitten using Red Island Fibres, 100% eco-processed merino in DK weight, in the colors Grey Days and Looks Like Fall. Yeah, so up behind me, you might see that the title of the episode is there. And it's giving you a little bit of spoiler of what I'm going to talk about here at the very end of my FOs. But before I get to that, I do quickly want to talk about the two things that I finished over the month of December. I did talk about these things there during the Fox and Christmas vlog that I did over the Christmas period. Yeah, I wanted to quickly talk about them again, so that way those of you who are more interested in watching the longer form videos like the podcast, then I can quickly talk about this. If you want more details, then go up into the iCard for the specific episodes that I talk about these items, because I'm just quickly going to talk about them. So the first item that I finished here is my 2020 Traveling Afghan. So this is a big old Afghan. I'll put a picture up of the entire Afghan, and just not what I can show on the screen. But this is the Traveling Afghan. And there are some things about this Afghan. So if you are going to, while watching this, you are interested in doing this Afghan, which I had a lot of fun doing it. Let me preface by, I had a lot of fun doing this Afghan. I learned a lot of cool new stitches. I got better at crochet. Love it. If you're going to do this Afghan, you need to make a choice at the very beginning to either A, commit to swatching every square, or B, understand that you're going to be changing the sizes of the squares as you go, or at the very end. And the reason for this is that, and it's a result of why this pattern is so much fun. The 2020 Traveling Afghan is a collaboration between 25 different fiber artists. It was organized by Two of Wands, which is Alexandra Tavel. You can find the information in the description down below. And it basically was Alexandra. Alexandra had a selection of wool from Lion Brands. I believe it was the Woolies line. And what she did is she made, and then she sent the square and the necessary hook size and the remaining yarn that she needed to the next person in the list of 25. And then person number 2 made a square and then sewed it to square 1. And then sent that whole package to person number 3. And so on and so forth. So this blanket, which I'm not going to talk about the environmental impacts of shipping a blanket 25 times, but let's pretend that that's not a problem. The really cool thing is that this blanket traveled around the world, and as each artist made a square, they sewed it onto the main blanket. So the problem with it is that each designer has a different gauge. So you trying to get gauge is going to require you to do a lot of different swatches of the squares and potentially a lot of ripping out or frogging to different hook sizes. So when I made my blanket, it calls for a 6mm hook across the board. I'm a loose crocheter, so I tend to go down a hook size in order for me to meet gauge. So I just started at 5.5mm. And I did the first square, got gauge. Great, cool, continued. And I didn't check my gauge again. And it wasn't until this square, which honestly I think is my favorite square. It wasn't until this square here, who's the designer is now on your screen. It wasn't until this square that I realized, yeah, there's gonna be a little bit of inconsistencies in size, but this square ended up being more than 12 inches square. This square's huge in comparison to the rest of the squares. So what I ended up doing was, instead of like changing sizes as I went, I just did the squares as is. And then after I'd completed them, I went and I added a border. So it was actually border based off of this square, turns out. And if you look closely, there's that really nice like textured border here. It's created by single crochets through the back loop. Just kind of adds like a little bit of a line, a little bit of texture all the way around. And I did that to all of the squares that were less than 12 inches square. So this one, which is a corner to corner that I threw in, I picked up all around my squares and did that border to make each of the individual squares 12 inches square. That's all. So let me reiterate, like I would do this blanket again. I would probably swatch it I would probably swatch each one, or at least measure my gauge a few rows in to see if I'm going to be meeting gauge and making modifications as needed. But I ended up using a lot more yarn than the pattern calls for. It called for 14 balls of that Lion brand Woolies. It's a worsted weight yarn. I ended up using Loops and Threads Soft Classic Acrylic, and I ended up using 16 balls. And I used pretty much all of the 16 balls. I think I might have 25 to 35, maybe 40 grams of the final ball. But overall, I really like the blanket. It's quite warm, as acrylic is. It's not moisture wicking, so if you're sweating into it, it's probably going to cause issues. But I have this on the back of the couch, or more accurately, next to me on the couch, so that way if I do get a little chilly, I can put this around myself. I did receive a weighted blanket for Christmas this year, so I have been using that more because weighted blankets are lovely. But I'm happy that I have this, and I'm happy that, you know, I got to learn all different kinds of different stitches to put this together. So that is my blanket. I said I was going to talk about this quickly, but here we are, probably 10 minutes later. So that is that blanket. And then the last finished object that I'm going to be talking about, the last physical finished object I'm going to be talking about, are these. So these are the coolest fucking socks ever. So these are my completed stripe tease socks by General Hogbuffer. And the yarn that I used was Regia sock yarn in one of the Arne and Carlos colorways. I'll put that information on the screen. I bought the yarn from Fleece and Harmony. Or rather, my mother bought the yarn from Fleece and Harmony and gave it to me for Christmas last year. And I really love how these socks turned out. So this sock pattern manipulates how self-striping sock yarn kind of like appears in knitting to make what looks to be patchwork socks. So I go into greater detail about how the pattern is laid out, how you pick up stuff. I even did a tutorial. I think I did something that required me to do a thing. iCard, look up in the iCard, and I'll link it to that particular episode of the Christmas vlog. But I finished these here about sometime last week, and I friggin' love these socks. I have not worn them yet. They do fit, so I have put them on, but I have not worn them for the day because I wanted to talk about it on the podcast first. I ended up using a 2mm needle, and that was just because I was weary of how the seams would feel. So I went with the smallest needle that I have, just so that way if I could potentially have a problem with how the seams feel on the bottom of my foot, that it should be minimized. So to give you more details about that, the bottom of the foot does have this patchwork here. So this is the bottom of the foot. There's my heel. So the bottom of the foot does have that patchwork here, but that of course creates a seam there and there across the bottom of your foot, which this would line up with like the most weight bearing part of the ball of your foot, right beneath your big toe. So I wanted to make sure that that's going to be as little of a problem as possible, and I think it is. Like, I quickly walked around on it and it didn't bother me. However, General Hogbuffer, because this pattern, which is free, this person could charge a whole bunch of money for this pattern because it's fucking cool. But they thought of the issues that people might have with a multiple strip sole. So there's actually a one-piece sole option in the pattern where you can do the entire sole section all in one bit. So the overall construction of the sock is you start with a cuff done in the round, and then you're taking a section of stitches, which is different for every size. The math and how to do that math is all included in that pattern. Really well laid out. It is a wall of text, be warned, but it's really easy to understand. And what you basically do is you work in strips going down, and then you pick up your side and you go work another strip. And what you're doing is you're doing the back half of the back of your calf basically first. Then you do your heel. So you work your heel. I did a slip stitch heel. You just do a gusset heel the way that you normally do. You turn your heel the same way, and then you pick up your stitches in an ingenious way to then make strips going down to the toe. So that way you're completing the back half and the bottom half of your sock before you touch the top section of your sock. After you've worked down to the toe and you've finished the entire bottom of the sock, then you pick up all of the stitches from the toe all the way up to the top, and you work your final 3 stitches, or 3 strips. And then finally, this final strip here uses, again, super ingenious method of picking up your stitches. You pick up all your stitches going down one side, you work across the top, or sorry, I should hold it this way because this is how you're working them. You pick up all the stitches going down the side of your sock, then you work across your last section of your cuff stitches, and then you pick up every second stitch coming down this way. And then you turn it around, and then you pick up and purl the stitches that you skipped to come back down here. So that way you can continue working back and forth, sewing and seaming as you go to finish this strip. It did take longer for me to finish this pair of socks than it would take me to do a vanilla sock, as you could probably expect. But it didn't feel like it took a lot longer. Because anytime that I would get bored with a particular section of the sock, it was time to change things up. So it was really, really nice. I am definitely going to be doing these socks again, using a different style of self-striping sock yarn. I'm not going to do it yet because I have other projects I need to get to. But if you know me well, you know that I typically don't do patterns a second time unless I'm doing like mass knitting. And this was just for me, and I don't plan on making socks for anybody else using this pattern because you need some measurements from people's feet, and I feel weird about measuring people's feet. Anyway, so this is my Striped Tease socks by General Hogbuffer. I love these socks. I can't wait to wear them. And now that I've recorded this episode, I'm going to wear them tomorrow while editing the episode. The last thing I'm going to talk about is Amanda's hat, which is, of course, the title of the video. So if you've been following the channel there in December, I made a quick, well, it wasn't super quick, but I made a hat for my cousin Amanda. She's the cousin that I'm closest with. And the story behind that was Amanda came home to Prince Edward Island. She lives in Alberta now. She came home to Prince Edward Island to visit and to close up her cottage for the year. And while she was here, it lined up with the PEI Fibre Festival, which was back in October. So she ended up going, and I wasn't planning on going. I wasn't planning on going. But then I was asked by Amanda from Red Island Fibres to if I'd be willing to watch her her booth so that way she could have a little bit of a lunch break, and of course I did do that. But and that was on the Saturday or the Sunday. I don't remember which day that was, but the day before, Amanda went to the Fibre Festival, and she was there, and she wanted to buy some yarn for a friend that lives in Alberta, and she just wanted to buy some yarn at the Fibre Festival while she was there. So Amanda went to the festival, and she ended up going through the entire festival, and she stopped off at the Belfast Mini Mills booth, which at that point, Belfast had decided that they were going to be closing their doors, and they were basically just going doorbusters trying to get rid of as much product as possible. So some of the deals that they were giving is that they had bags of yarn. When it came to the worsted weight, they were selling 400 grams of worsted weight for, I think, $30. Might have been $40. But like some of the deals that they were giving were like, we're selling yarn at 50% off compared to what we were selling it in the store. And Amanda, she specifically asked me to tell the story. Amanda went and was speaking to one of the helpers, not one of the owners. She just happened to pick up a bag. And since Amanda doesn't know really much about knitting, she was a little apprehensive of buying the wrong amount of yarn. So she picked up this bag of worsted weight yarn, which I can't remember if it was 300 grams or 400 grams, but she picked up this little bag of worsted weight yarn, and she asked the person who was helping the owners with the booth if this was enough yarn to make a hat. Which the viewers who know how to make hats and all of that, who are well versed, will know that you only need between 70 to 80 grams to make a hat. And this bag was at least 300 grams, might have been 400 grams. So the helper, who is known for being, how do I want to put this? Heart of gold, but doesn't take anybody's shit. Does that sound about right? This helper laughed in Amanda's face, which Amanda's like, oh, how dare you? But also, this is a really good deal. I'm going to buy it. And when that happened, immediately after it happened, Amanda texted me. She's like, who is this person? They were rude to me. And I'm like, oh my God, it's this person. They mean well. Anyway, so Amanda did end up buying the yarn, and then she wanted to take me out for dinner. So we went out to lunch, technically, and she's like, hey, well, actually, I bought this, which included a ball of Kiviot from Belfast Mini Mills. And because they were selling that for a ridiculous price. I think they were selling the Kiviot for $40 for 2 ounces, and it's 100% worsted weight Kiviot. A literal steal. So Amanda had bought this yarn, and she wanted to know if, what would be a good yarn to pair with it, if any, to make hats. So I told her a little bit of things over dinner, and she's like, well, let's go back to the Fibre Festival, and we'll go pick something out. So we went to the festival again, and I went in through, and I walked through the majority of the space. I purposefully did not go towards the BMM court, but we went through, and the first thing that I thought that would work well with the Kiviot, because of how the elasticity is alpaca. And of course, as soon as you walk in, Green Gables alpaca is there. And Janet was there running the shop. So we chit chat, and I talked to Amanda about what the best version of this yarn would be. And I point out the worsted weight, I believe it's the Royal Birch line. Any of these would be suitable, and we just basically color matched. We ended up using wintergreen, which is that lovely green that's in the picture that you can see here. And Amanda asked if I would be willing to make her hat. So I said, of course. And then she gave me the Kiviot, which she had purchased 4 ounces of Kiviot, and then the 4-ounce ball of or I think it was 100 grams technically. The 100 grams of the Royal Birch Green Gables alpaca in the color wintergreen. So it kind of sat in my stash for about a month until I started working at it and sent Amanda a like the process. There's a video that I did on the vlog there in December that I'll put up in the iCard where I talk about the process of doing the pattern. And up until the end of January, you will be able to find the first version of this pattern, which there are mistakes in it. The first version of the pattern available for free. There are mistakes, there are changes that I've made into the finished pattern, which is what I'm going to talk about. I've finished the pattern. So with the wonderful work that Kat Montgomery and Carol, oh God, I can't remember, it's Gagnon or anyway, with the wonderful work that Kat and Carol did doing the Ravelry test knit during this time, I was able to determine what is the better way of doing some of the things that I wanted to be done in the hat, as well as making sure that there isn't like little mistakes in the chart like there was, and taking care of that. So thank you, Kat. Thank you, Carol, for fixing that up to me. I will be forwarding along like corrected versions of the pattern for you as a thank you for doing that test knit for me. On the projects page, I will, well, actually, if I can get permission from both of them, which I already have permission for, if I can get permission from both of them to use their pictures in the podcast here in the meantime, I will put the pictures of their finished projects up, because the colors that they chose, great. And some of the work that Kat did was test the pattern to work with a different type of yarn, and she tested it to work with Knit Picks Wool of the Andes yarn, and she says it works beautifully with it. And I am going to be testing it here in the near future with Fleece and Harmony Selkirk worsted to see how well that works. I don't foresee to have any issues with it. I don't foresee needing to make any changes, but I just want to have that as an option, so that way you can use an island-made yarn to make an island-made hat. Yeah, so I think that's everything that I've got for the main podcast, the Fibre podcast, as it were. So if that's all you're here for, thank you for joining me, and I will see you next time. But if you want to hear a little bit more about how my life has been going and how accounting student life has been for the past couple weeks, then stick around. But if you are going to be leaving, please, before you go, consider subscribing to the channel. Please comment down below. Give me your rating here. I hope to see you guys back in the future. Anyway, without further ado, I'm just going to get a little bit more comfortable and get to knitting. Oh, Troy, you and all of your unlabeled needles. Okay, let me just figure out which one of these I'm using. I think I'm using 4s in my mitten, so it should be that one. Yeah. So anyway, I'm gonna talk while I figure out which one of these needles I need to continue with my mitten. I found it. And the first one I found is the one I needed. Anyway, so for those of you who've been following along, and I've been, hinting that I'm going back to school, and I have started classes. So I am doing a Bachelor's of Commerce with a major of Accounting through Athabasca University, which is a university based in Athabasca, Alberta. But it is primarily a online learning and self-directed learning university, so you do the learning remotely. So while I'm still living in Prince Edward Island, I'm attending a university in Alberta. Anyway, so the purpose of the accounting is that last summer, when I was getting a little disillusioned, is the word I'll use, with my current situation, I decided that it was time for me to go back to school and to become a professional of some sort that is actually going to be a feasible profession that's going to align with my goals in life, right? And since I've always liked math, and when I was younger, the very first thing that I wanted to be that wasn't an artist was a math teacher. So I thought that maybe I should do something related with math and accounting. And then I saw how much accountants make. And I'm like, this is the one. So I started January 1st. So I'm doing, I'm a full-time student. So I'm like in full-time classes. Typically when you take a course from Athabasca, you have 6 months to complete the course because you're only usually taking 1 or 2 courses at a time. And the idea is that these are like night classes that you can complete while working full-time to either receive a new certification or to slowly build up on your skills to then qualify for better pay raises and things like that. But because they have a major accounting program, and their program can be tailored to better fit you moving into becoming a CPA, a Chartered Professional Accountant, which is a title here in Canada, I'm decided to go that route. And yeah, so I'm a full-time student. I only have 4 months to complete this semester because they actually align this up into like more of a semester feel when it comes to being a full-time student where you're, well, in my case, I'm using financial aid. I took out a student loan to do this. And as part of the using financial aid / student loans, you have to do it as a full-time student in that kind of capacity. I would imagine that there's laws on the books to prevent. Anyway, I'm not going to get into that because that's me talking out of my ass. So I've been working away at that. And up until today, I felt, well, I should say the end of last week, which would be, you know, that would have been Friday the 5th. I felt really good because like I was just pecking at stuff. One of the things, I should preface this, one of the things that the university does really well to keep you on task is that they give you access to a tool that you basically put in your course that you're working on. Then you put in your start date and your end date. So in my case, it's a 4-month end date. And what it does is it takes the units of your course or chapters, however you want to put it, and spits out a timeline for you to complete each section. And it also spits out when you need to order your exams because you have to do your exams. And you have to hire a proctor and all of that. So I did that for all of my courses, and there at the end of last week, I felt like I was really far ahead because, you know, I had already started doing work on the chapter 1s of a couple of courses where like the first week is just like the getting ready to get started courses. And then this Monday, so today for me is Thursday, the 11th. This is going to go up on the 13th, that's the plan. But on on Monday, the 8th, I sat down and I looked to see like where I was in in staying on that task. And what I've just been doing is just like, you know, working for an hour each day, maybe a little bit longer if I'm interested in it. Working for about an hour and taking a break and then just moving on to the next thing. So I've just been going, you know, the courses I'm taking is I'm taking 4 courses right now: accounting, administration, it's CMIS is what it is, but it's like microcomputing in it's basically learning how to use Microsoft Office, but it's like microcomputing in accounting. And then microeconomics, because it's one of those core courses that I'm forced to take. So I've just been kind of just working down the list, and Monday I decided to see like where I was sitting at each of those courses, and I'm like, okay, cool. CMIS supposed to be done on Wednesday. The first chapter of economics is supposed to be done on Wednesday. And then the other 2 are supposed to be done today, Thursday. And then I compare that to where I am in the modules, and I had already completed the CMIS, like the computing course, because it's just, at this point it's just using Word. I know how to use Word. All my patterns are done in Word. All of the notes that I've been taking for all my courses, I'm doing it in Word. Anyway, so that's been already completed. So I'm like, cool, great, awesome, I'm ahead of the game. So then I look through admin, I'm like, cool. I'm right on part of this particular class. I find it so fascinating, and I'll tell you why, because it's not the reason that you think. And then accounting, I love the accounting part, really love this math part. It feels like I'm actually doing what I'm supposed to be doing instead of wasting my time with electives. Which, you know, great. So like I'm loving those courses. And then I go and look at microeconomics. And I'm like, okay, cool. I just need to finish chapter 1. That's fine. No, unit 1. which is 3 chapters. So here I was, like, just about like a page before I do like the review questions for chapter 1, and I'm supposed to do 2 more chapters in 2 more days. And because of how econ is set up, there's quizzes that I have to take for credit that are done at the end of each unit. So like the student plan that you're taking is just a guideline. You're not marked on whether or not you complete things on time on that. As long as you submit all of your coursework at before the end of your contract date, which for me is the end of April, it's fine, right? But for me, I set my deadline of I'm doing my quiz on this day. I'm doing my quiz on Wednesday. And I hadn't even worked through a quarter of the material yet. So Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, honestly, I spent 6 hours on just economics, trying to catch up. So up until now, this week, I felt like I was super far behind, and I'm technically still a little bit behind. But I have caught up. I have done my econ. That is done. I took that test this morning, and now I'm just working through like the practice problems on accounting, loving that, and then the admin course. I'm just going to continue reading the textbook and laughing about that. So I'm going to put my knitting down because I'm not actually doing a lot of knitting. I'm just pointing with my needle at this point. So my admin course, which is actually, it's under the administration setting, but it's actually Introduction to Business in Canada is the name of that course. And that course has given me a new insight on why college-age men specifically, college-age business majors or commerce majors are so insufferable. Like, okay, so this is an introductory course to business in Canada. So it's giving you an introduction to business in general, and it's defining some terms. So it defines what an economy is, it defines what types of economies there are out there, and defines like the political, defines some of the political terms around these kinds of economies. So the thing that I've realized why it's so biased is, the thing that makes, at least in my perspective, the thing that makes those college age business majors so insufferable is that the textbook is so incredibly biased, like egregiously biased. Like it's laughable, and it's so fascinating to read what is effectively a piece of propaganda as a textbook in learning. So, this is not this kind of channel. I'm not going to get political here, but I think it's clear that people can think I'm on the left side of things, and you would be correct. And I find it so fascinating that this textbook is so much further to the right than I am, that like it's so fascinating how things are being framed, okay? Because like when I read a textbook, I expect it to be unbiased, I expect it to be neutral, and this textbook is not. So the reason why I say this is because I'll give you 2 examples. The first example is how they define the terms command economy, market economy, and mixed market economy, as well as defining the terms communism, capitalism, and socialism, okay? So for those of you who are not super well-versed in this, a command economy is an economy in which the government controls production, and they control how the resources are used in an economy. A free market economy is an economy where the government plays very little role. So it doesn't have direct control over the resources, and it doesn't have direct control over the like the means of production, like how production happens and what production happens. They don't have direct control over that. The people have the direct control over those things. And then a mixed market economy is one that takes aspects of both and combines them at ideally a good rate to make a well-functioning economy. So the idea is that Canada is a mixed market economy, meaning that they take certain aspects that the government controls, kind of like our healthcare. Healthcare is a nationalized service. The Canada Post, nationalized company. So the government does control certain aspects of needs and certain aspects of production and those kinds of services. And then other services that are profit driven, so like the oil fields in Canada, or retail services, restaurateurs, that's all private ownership. So that's where Canada stands. And then it defines communism as in a command economy where, the government owns anything and everything and people don't have property rights in the same sense that if I'm oversimplifying here. And then it defines communism as a command economy, which is, the government owns the means of production. So that's, they decide where the resources are allocated and what gets produced and by whom, that kind of thing. And then it defines capitalism as the political idea of the free market controlling everything. So like individuals make the decisions and not the government. And then if you know much about socialism, then you know that socialism is similar to communism in the sense that the government owns certain means of productions, but not all of them. And it combines capitalism because some of those services that are more profit-driven, like restaurants, like clothing stores, those kinds of things, are still privately owned. So that way you can still own that kind of thing, right? And you can make profit based on a market. So the text compares, command economies and with communism, but then puts socialism under a command economy instead of a mixed market economy. And to further separate Canada from being a socialist country, which we're not, but like we're closer to a socialist country than a free market economy, or anyway. So instead of blatantly stating that Canada is a socialist country, they decide to instead further differentiate the terms of a mixed market economy and socialism by defining privatization and deregulation as inherent actions inside of a mixed market economy, which they are, which privatization is when a nationalized service becomes a private entity, kind of like what Air Canada did. And then deregulation is removing of regulations, preventing economic growth. But then they didn't define the terms of nationalization, like what happened to our healthcare system back in the 60s and 70s, where our private healthcare system was then nationalized, or describing how regulation works. They doesn't define those terms in the introduction. So like, because it's not defining all of those terms in a neutral manner, it feels very, very biased. And then like the clincher, and I laughed out loud at this part, but the introductory chapter to the introduction of business in Canada decided that it would be great to criticize the current president of China for removing term limits, which this is not a judgment of whether or not you should criticize the president of China. That's not what I'm trying to get at here. My point is that like the textbook took time to make that criticism in the introductory chapter of a book that is supposed to be the introductory course textbook for the economy of Canada. Sure, we'll be talking about the Chinese economy later, but taking that time in the introduction feels weird. Feels a little weird. So I just finding reading the textbook for that course is just so fascinating. I think I've read only the first 2/3 of the chapter, and I've got, I think, 15 pages of notes in like typed notes, not written notes on a little notebook. I'm talking like typed notes. I've got 15 pages of it because it's just so fascinating. So anyway, so that's how my life's been going. I've just been trucking along, doing schoolwork. My next major performance with Luminos, I'm a musician for those of you who are new here. Luminos is the choir / ensemble orchestra that I perform with. Our next major performance, I do believe, is in March, and that would be the Mass for Climate Change. I'll put the information on the screen. I don't believe that tickets are available yet, but as soon as they're available, I will be sure to talk about it in a podcast episode. We are getting just past an hour here for recording, so I'm going to end it here. Thank you for watching. I need to give a rating. I guess I'm going to rate today's episode. You know what? I'm going to rate today's episode 3 out of 4 courses because I have caught up on 3 of my 4 courses. And the one that I'm not caught up on is the one that I've been saving to the last because it's so fascinating. Admin. Anyway, if you think I'm the worsted, because I'm keeping that, if you still think I'm the worsted, comment down below, give me a rating down in the comments. And if you feel so inclined, please subscribe to the channel, share with your friends, and maybe give the video a like. I'll see you guys later. Bye.